Every single cell in the body needs iodine. Every tissue needs iodine. Iodine is an antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. It's a heavy metal chelator. It's my shield. We use more nutrients when we're in a state of stress. If your body's fighting an infection, that is a stress state. You need more iodine. So it boosts your immune system. Your immune system needs iodine. The substances that interfere with the absorption of iodine, fluoride, chloride, bromide. So that is really why people need to supplement, because they have been exposed to substances that prevent the absorption of iodine, even if they can get it in their food source, which they can't really. There are places in the world that have too much fluoride in the ground. Certain places in England where tea is grown, India, China. I don't think there's any way you can get away with drinking black tea, white tea, green tea. I mean, I lived in China, so I had access to the best teas in the world. I would consider all of them to be poison today. The problem is that nobody's doing the Hakala lab tests. They're all going to their local lab and they're testing radioactive iodine. They're all looking for Chernobyl. None of these iodine blood tests that you get are testing organic iodine. They're testing for radioactive iodine.
Elizabeth, what would you say are the biggest challenges and mistakes you see people making once they've adopted a carnivore diet?
Not eating enough fat. A lot of people see the carnivore diet first, come into contact or get information about the carnivore diet from some of the popular influencers like Sean Baker, who eats mostly protein. And I would say males need more, actually women need more fat than males do to make more steroid hormones. So I think that is and also that will probably be a part of the fact that protein has fewer calories than fat does. And people still they've been trained. We've all been trained all our lives to count calories, and fat has double the calories that a gram of protein does.
Okay, so you say more fat. When it comes to fat, are we talking about fattier cuts of meat?
No.
Or adding additional fat to that meat?
I'm talking about adding additional fat to that meat because the fat is an anti-inflammatory. So people who come to me have inflammation. People who come to me, obviously, they have health issues, which they're trying to address. When you're addressing health issues, you need to convalesce. You need to have adequate nutrients in order to get your body back into kind of untie the knot that your endocrine system has been tied into, possibly from avoiding fat, possibly from being stressed, possibly from dieting, hypocaloric eating. So in an ill state, in a state with health issues, women primarily, and some men too. I have a lot of men who do much better on high fat in the anti-inflammatory phase of the protocol.
All right, let's go over some examples of what that would look like. So if somebody's cooking up a steak, they're putting, say, butter or tallow on top of that at the end, and say it's ground beef and they're making burger patties. Same kind of thing, adding butter and tallow. Give me some nuance there, what that would look like. Okay,
so you know that burgers are pre-digested in the sense that the blades that grind the meat have altered the protein somewhat. It's not horrible. It's just that the steak is going to have more nutrients because, I mean, when you cook a steak, if you're doing it medium, I've weighed it, and when you do it medium rare, there's 25% of the weight gone. Some of that is fat. It stays in the pan or it comes down into the grill tray, and some of that is water soluble nutrients. So ground beef, you're going to have fewer. It's pre-digested in the sense that it has already gone through this process of being ground up. But yes, absolutely, adding fat like the French do to a piece of steak. That's what we do at home, and or tallow. Absolutely, that's what I would recommend if you want to. I mean, that's actually what I give people to eat: steak and couple of tablespoons of fat.
Any other animal fats we can add to that category that are good additions?
All animal fats, not plant sterols, not olive oil, not coconut oil, animal fat. So a lot of people I hear recently, a few people told me they're adding duck fat. So duck, I think, would be better than possibly a cleaner animal than chicken. Lard, I guess, in certain places. Apparently, it's much cleaner in Vietnam, a few patients in Vietnam, than, say, I can get in Italy. We call lard strutto, and it's what everything used to be made out of, and now everything has seed oils in it. All the brioche and all those things are made with seed oil, and they actually have on the storefront, they'll have no strutto. So, because that's bad because it's cholesterol. But I think that lard, I think in Scotland, lard is much better than it would be in Italy. It depends on the source.
All right. You brought seed oils in, and you also talked about some of the quote unquote healthy plant fats, such as coconut oil. I forget what specifically ones you covered there, but typically in that category would be like avocado oil, olive oil. I want to make sure we have a distinction there between the seed oils and those oils, because the seed oils are in a category of themselves that
right.
No matter what diet you're on are considered toxic.
Right. So seed oils are canola, peanut. It's not even a seed. Those are the oils that we know are trans fats. That's are very, very, very inflammatory. But what I'm talking about is that those are inflammatory. The olive oil wouldn't be inflammatory, but it's not going to give you cholesterol. Avocado and coconut oil are not going to give you cholesterol. And the cholesterol, the molecule, only comes from animals.
But arguably, if you're using your volume of food intake and calories with those other medium, we'll say, on the continuum of fats, you're taking up valuable space that you could use for healthy animal fats that come along with cholesterol.
Yes. Yes. I would make your mayonnaise, if you want to have mayonnaise, out of bacon fat and not out of olive oil.
You mentioned earlier cooking a steak and talked about, I forget what you said. It was something like medium rare or medium in that range.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at cooking meats? Is there a difference if you start with a really high quality piece of ruminant meat and you cook it well done versus rare? The end product and the nutrition you're getting, do you see that as different? Or is that just a personal preference thing and cooking isn't affecting the end product so much?
It's affecting the end product because when you cook something, the water comes out of it. It's like dehydrating something. So my jerky that I eat as a snack, or my meat cookies, which are dehydrated, ground up, slow cooked beef rib meat, are not going to have any of this stuff. It's like eating a protein isolate. So my meat cookies that I put butter on are not like eating a medium rare steak because all of the water soluble nutrients are gone.
Okay, but I'm talking more from a chemical change of cooking the meat. So a steak that's been cooked well done versus, say, on a grill versus a rare steak, and that meat being chemically changed by that processing method.
It's more devoid of nutrients. Are we talking about the protein molecules being altered?
Yeah, the altering chemically versus something being removed from the cooking process.
Right. Cooking will, just like grinding the beef, will somewhat alter the protein molecule. We know that proteins are very susceptible to heat. So the protein molecule will be altered. So I would still put it in the same category of there's not as much nutrition in it.
Can you give us the recipe of those meat cookies?
I get beef ribs and I slow cook them in a crock pot or an Instapot, and I give the gelatinous collagen to my older daughter, and I use the fat. I keep a little bit of meat, and I make tallow bars with the fat. So I separate everything, and then I take all the meat off of the bones, and it's very arduous. Remove the membranes. That's the most arduous part, and then I grind it, and then I make little cookies, and I stick them in the dehydrator.
And then you mentioned you add fat to those when you consume them.
I add butter. Or smoked salmon.
So it sounds like for you, coming back to this opening theme here, adding fat to food, for you, tallow and butter are the two primary fats that you use?
Yes, absolutely.
Any other big, again, coming back to the opening, challenges or mistakes you see people making on the carnivore diet?
There are some people who are so inflamed or have an immune system which has turned autoimmune. The tiny amount of milk protein in the butter could be temporarily a source of inflammation for them. they will eventually put the butter back in when they are better, because it's really the dose of the poison. It's the milk protein that is the issue for the immune system, just like gluten. Any kind of your immune system is looking for proteins. It's looking for viruses. It's looking for bacteria. They're all made out of protein. So if your immune system has become autoimmune because it's so inflamed, it will mistakenly think that the small amount of milk protein in the butter and cause you to be inflamed. So, and some people may need to stick to tallow temporarily. And again, I live in Italy, so you may have better sources of lard than I can get. It really depends on where we are.
We did cover this last time, but let's get into more detail on quality. So when it comes to these meats that we're starting with, the fats we're adding to them, obviously everybody, as you just touched on, has different access to different things. People have different budgets.
Yeah.
But how do you look at that from a nutrient standpoint? So having something that is grass-fed, grass-finished, having, chicken or pork that's been pasture-raised, if people have access and the means, how big of a difference does that make in the nutrition they're getting?
10%. I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think that definitely if you've got your own chickens in your yard and you're not giving them grain and they're eating bugs, you're less likely to react to the omega-6 if you're inflamed in that egg white. People often react to egg white. My son went carnivore. He's a teacher in Athens. He can't get the cuts of meat that I can afford. So he's never going to get grass fed. I mean, I don't even know where he would get it in Athens. So you have to, I don't think that he's compromising his health by not, and I don't get grass fed. We used to get Scottish and Irish until Brexit, and it's ridiculously expensive right now. So instead of paying, gold for my steak, I'm getting it from Piedmont now. So, you have to do, I don't think that, I think that in a perfect world, everybody could eat grass-fed, not just because they're eating more nutritious, slightly more nutritious, slightly less amount of omega-6 in the ruminant meat, right? But it's also better for the environment. We know that, pastured animals are just better. The whole process, regenerative agriculture, is better for the environment. In the UK, by law, in Scotland and Ireland, it's not the UK, but it's still, they have the same laws. They're all like Australian. They're all outside all the time. So in Italy, you have part outside, part inside. In the States, you have different kinds of. But I don't think that's something that somebody has to really worry about tremendously.
While we're on this topic of budget and quality, how do you think about some of the processed meats, things like hot dogs, bacon? How do they fit on this continuum for people if they're trying to heal and then in more maintenance mode?
I would say you can get great hot dogs in the U.S. I can't get them. And I don't know, but unfortunately the great hot dogs probably cost more than the cheaper hot dogs. But I think that if you want to go on a carnivore diet, I think that if just by removing carbohydrates, you're doing 75% of it. I don't think you need to be so concerned about, my husband eats some pork. We can't get bacon. It's only pancetta here and it's not the same. He eats chicken maybe once a week. I don't. It doesn't turn me on. So I'm not worried about him eating chicken or pork or it's just that he happens to like it. I have actually heard women feeling more satiated with ruminant than chicken and pork. So maybe it's the iron content. Italians eat a lot of veal. They don't even like red meat. They like veal. They like no blood. And veal has no iron. So 100 grams of beef, red meat has 2.6, 2.7 grams of iron per 100 grams. Veal has 1.
For somebody coming to this conversation, and money is a real issue, and at this point, maybe they can only afford, say, like traditional hot dogs, lunch meat, some of the really low quality meats, Spam, things that are in cans.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still feel like they can improve their health eating these really low quality meats?
I think they can. This is in the 70s. My dad would take us camping in Europe because my parents were divorced, and all we had was Spam for a month. Probably the Spam of today, you have to check the ingredients. I'm sure they didn't even check the ingredients in the 70s when my father was getting it. But I think that you can definitely improve your health by removing carbohydrates.
And how do you feel about organ meats, including things like liver, heart, eating nose to tail and getting those in on at least a semi-regular basis?
I think it's something that I'm going to do in Paris when I go visit for a trip, but it's not something I can do regularly because I can't even get some of that stuff. I can't get, my butcher would have to order oxtail especially, and he doesn't want to do that. So if you can do that, that's great. But I don't think my health is compromised by not eating. Eating nose to tail every day. My mother used to give me liver once a week when I was a kid. My husband's mother did too. So people used to have liver once a week, I think, in a lot of places. But I don't do it now. We do have liver kind of regularly, but it's not like something we're really concerned about, making sure we keep in our diet every day, all the time.
But bottom line, if you could get access to these, include them in your diet on a regular basis, do you think there would be a benefit there?
I think that a ribeye is going to be more nutritious than tongue. I went to Prague and had a lot of tongue because I can never get tongue here. But I think that the composition of ribeye, beef, red meat is so nutritious that, the thymus and the kidneys they're not even they're very muscular, and I don't think that they're really full of nutrition. The liver is definitely more full of nutrition because it's the liver. Everything passes through the liver. But beef liver is going to be more nutritious than pig and chicken liver.
The other option for people like you or people that just want to have ease of consuming organs is these supplements that are now on the market where you can get grass-fed, grass-finished organs. I know in general you're not a big fan of supplements, but would that be something you'd ever consider?
No, and I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's a waste of money. I think that if you can get beef, you're fine.
The other challenge too is that when you start introducing those kind of things, it's easy to take in quite a bit. And obviously in nature, when somebody takes down an animal, there's one liver there. And naturally, you're only going to be able to have so much within a certain period of time. With these new supplements, you can take them on a daily basis indefinitely and in whatever amounts. So you have to be careful if you dip your toe in that realm.
Yeah, you have to be careful with all supplements because they're basically very potent small amounts of things that we're just supposed to get from our regular diet. As you said, there's one liver and the rest of it is muscle meat in an animal that you kill.
But one supplement you're a huge fan of, iodine in your iodine shield. Mm-hmm. I want to come back into that. There's a lot of detail we can cover within this subject. For people at this point who aren't supplementing with iodine, talk about the current landscape and what they're not getting from the diet and why iodine is so beneficial.
Well, they're not getting iodine from the diet. The iodine would only have been if you were having dairy, which I don't recommend, when the cow's teats were cleaned with iodine. And then in the 60s, they started using Clorox to clean the cow's teats. So the soil is supposed to have a certain amount of iodine in it in certain places. And the grass that the cows would eat would have the iodine. But it's not really the issue of the goiter belt that, we know places, Switzerland, any mountainous region is going to be devoid. The soil is going to be devoid of iodine. The issue today that is more concerning are the substances that interfere with the absorption of iodine, the fluoride, the chloride, the bromide. So that is really why people need to supplement, because they have been exposed to substances that prevent the absorption of iodine, even if they can get it in their food source, which they can't really.
You mentioned the other halides and how they can get in the way of absorption of iodine. Where are those typically found?
Your toothpaste, water, if they've put fluoride in your water, chlorine in the pool, bromide in my chair, probably this, fire retardant substances, fabrics, things like that, car seats. People aren't licking their car seats. I think it's more the fluoride that's in the water and PFAs, which are in our water that we can't escape. There's PFAs in the Maldives. So where are we going to go? We can't go anywhere. We shouldn't be running for the hills. We should be taking iodine to prevent insufficiency.
And as you explain that, I can see this as a double negative where the other halides are so apparent in today's modern world, affecting our iodine absorption. And then the one halide that we want to get isn't readily found in the food anymore. So it's hitting it from both ends.
That's correct. I mean, and iodine is an essential nutrient. Chloride, bromide, and fluoride are absolutely not. Fluoride being the one that is highly touted as something that prevents your teeth from deteriorating, but this is not true. It was never proven. There's actually evidence to the contrary, that it causes fluorosis and makes your teeth rot, which is what the fluoride content in actually natural water sources. Fluoride is a mineral that is in the ground. So there are places in the world that have too much fluoride in the ground. Certain places in England, where tea is grown, India, China, those places, the well water is very, very rich in fluoride. And those are the people those areas, a lot of congenital hypothyroidism, dwarfism, low stature, I think is what you're supposed to say today, and learning disabilities, and of course, goiter.
Let's talk more about that tea piece. So the tea leaves are being grown in soil that contains fluoride. So the end product that is dried out and shipped and packaged, you're getting that when you steep your tea, you're getting that put back into the water?
Yes. And the cheaper teas have more fluoride than the more expensive teas. They have an actual rating system of how much fluoride is in the tea. Brick tea, loose, has a lot more fluoride than your more expensive brands. It's kind of like selenium, Brazil nuts. People think that they're going to get selenium from Brazil nuts. There are areas that have more selenium in the soil, and those trees, the nuts of those trees will have more selenium in them than the other ones. But tea, it has the acidity that people like with tea means there's more fluoride in it. So they actually, push they're augmenting the fluoride by breeding and things like that to have the tea have more fluoride in it, so it has more acidity in the flavor.
All right, so cheaper teas, more of an issue here. How big of a problem is this in general? And is there specific types of tea people can still drink and not worry about this?
No, it's poison. So it's a huge problem. I actually gave this paper to somebody in the UK. An Irish researcher published a warning to his country because they've mandated fluoride in the water, and the Irish drink a ton of tea. So there's a huge rate of learning disabilities, fluorosis, fracture, bone, osteoporosis, et cetera, in everything that fluorosis causes in Ireland. So I don't think there's any way you can get away with drinking black tea, white tea, green tea. I mean, I lived in China, so I had access to the best teas in the world. None of them, I would consider all of them to be poison today.
Interesting. So even like a ceremonial grade matcha tea, organic, that's being sold as a health food.
Yes.
In your opinion, stay away.
Absolutely stay away. Matcha's green tea. We used to do Kung Fu Cha. I used to do martial arts, and the whole Kung Fu Cha is a whole ceremony of, I had some really good tea and followed the whole ceremony and everything. But I have a grandchild. They live in the UK. Tea is forbidden.
For somebody that's been drinking a lot of tea in the past, is there a way to test to see how much of it's accumulated in the body? And also, can you test teas for somebody that's in love with their tea right now, doesn't want to give it up, and wants to just see if their particular blend, this is an issue for, even though it's such a big issue in general? Can we test the tea? Can we test the body?
You can test the body. You can test the fluoride, bromide, and chloride content in your urine and test the iodine. How much iodine is not able to come in because of these halides blocking the absorption of iodine. Hakala Labs in the U.S. does that. It's 24-hour urine uptake. You collect your urine for 24 hours after ingesting 50 milligrams of iodine. You collect the urine. They test it, and they give you the results of how much bromide, the toxicity of halides in your urine, in your system. The teas, this Irish paper, actually, I have found all the brands. He went through all the Irish brands that are popular. I haven't seen, I have a couple of papers from China that did test the fluoride in, not in particular teas. Yes, in teas. I actually have it because there's Anhui province and there's different provinces that they did test. But I don't know if you can test your brand. I don't know what your brand is. My mom used to drink Celestial. No. Constant comment. So I have no idea what you guys have in the stores in your tea section anymore. But I know that matcha is popular, green tea, all that. Avoid it.
Any other plants that are prone to this, taking the fluoride and concentrating it in the product?
Tea is the worst one. Yes.
So coffee, not an issue.
Coffee, not an issue.
No other plants people are eating?
Well, there are plants that prevent the absorption of iodine. Brassica, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, all those plants, that whole family of plants, they figured that out because the farmer went to check his rabbits and they were all eating cabbage leaves and they all had little goiters. So the scientists, I don't know if I talked about this last time, the scientists went there and isolated basically what is in today's anti-thyroid medication, methimazole, from these plants. So it is a anti-thyroid medication, or anti-thyroid substance, because it prevents the absorption of iodine. So in my book, Good Fat is Good for Girls, Puberty and Adolescence, I actually do list more foods that we eat. Oatmeal is another one that prevent the absorption of iodine.
Any others you can think of off the top of your head?
Flax seeds.
Before we get into how somebody can supplement with iodine, we're going to get back into dosages and details within that. Let's talk about why iodine is so important.
Every single cell in the body needs iodine. Every tissue needs iodine. So your adrenals need iodine, your salivary glands, your the male's prostate, not just the thyroid, female uterus, ovaries, breast tissue. Every mucus-bearing tissue has a ton of iodine in it. So your intestinal, the microbiome stuff that people are always talking about, not going to happen if you don't have adequate iodine in your intestinal mucus. Iodine is an antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. It's a heavy metal chelator. As I said, it's my shield. The thyroid takes a minimum of 6 milligrams. The breasts in females take 5 milligrams. Can't remember how much the prostate takes. I would consider any cyst in these tissues, any growth, any inflammation due to iodine deficiency.
And from last time we talked, the ideal dose of Lugol's, as you recommend the Lugol's, for maintenance was 2 drops of 5% per day.
Yeah.
Is that still correct?
Maintenance after you have, yes. If you have had, I have women who come to me with swollen lymph glands, fibroids, in their uterus. So I will have them douche with iodine. So you're actually getting it closer to the tissue that needs the iodine. If you're taking it orally, that's why Lugol's is better because it's much more easily absorbed. You're taking it, everybody's going to fight about the iodine if you are severely deficient. So sometimes it's better to just get it. People paint their breasts with iodine.
And when it comes to time of day to take it, does it matter? Is it better earlier on in the day with food? Just details on to best absorb it.
Yeah, I would say earlier in the day, we are supposed to peak between 6 and 9, all our hormones kind of peak at that time. So you're waking up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to greet the day. I would take what you need in the morning. There are people who have inflamed thyroids that might react to the 2 drops that I'm saying you should take. So then you need to see if you've got nodules or, thyroid antibodies.
Explain that in greater detail. What you're saying there is if somebody already has a problem in the thyroid, if they activate that by taking Lugol's, they might run into problems because of that.
Yes.
Otherwise, iodine isn't something we need to worry about. The kidneys will remove excess.
Correct. Now, imagine the tissue that has been devoid for a long time. So that could be the uterus, that could be the ovaries, that could be, the breast tissue. So, but usually the thyroid, because the thyroid is all follicular. Every part of the thyroid is the follicles are always there to make hormones. So breast tissue is not that way. Uterus is not that way. Prostate is not that way. So if it hasn't had the iodine it's need, if it's kind of hunkered down and it hasn't been producing adequate thyroid hormone because it doesn't have enough iodine, and it has maybe grown an extra piece, expanding itself, trying to get more iodine, that extra piece or that inflamed thyroid will sit up and take notice and scream at you.
And how will somebody know if that's the case?
Palpitations, they might have hyperthyroid symptoms, but they desperately need the iodine anyway. So then we do a detox.
Okay. So let's say somebody finds out they have one of these nodules. They need to stop taking the dose you're recommending here. How do they, or can they go about healing that?
They can definitely go about healing that. I always recommend they do the salt loading protocol by taking a small amount, 1 drop of iodine, a glass of half teaspoon of salt and a little glass of water, followed by a whole bigger glass of water until they have to urinate, because this is the way that the iodine will attack, and the salt will pull the other halides out of the system. And so that's a detox. Iodine becomes vapor if it's attached to salt.
Okay. So is that more a protocol for somebody that's new to iodine? I was getting at the person that has some kind of growth on the thyroid, and then they're having a problem taking the iodine. What you just explained there seems like a flush for anybody that wants to basically get everything to ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
The part you just explained there, is that for everybody or just somebody with a nodule?
Well, I think it's for everybody, but definitely somebody with a nodule, because they are not able to have, their system is already so deficient in iodine that that part of their tissue might react. So it'll start working. And just it starting working can possibly make every single organ in the body. The heart is very much so. Epinephrine is always telling the heart the rhythm to beat, right? And that comes from thyroid hormone. So if all of a sudden there's more thyroid hormone than your body has ever hasn't dealt with in decades, everybody kind of has to get in line and figure out how to use that hormone again. It's like resistance.
Okay.
So yes, it is a flush. And this, what I'm talking about, is addressing also resistance to the hormone that is made.
But for somebody with a nodule on the thyroid doing the flush, will that physical nodule dissipate over time?
Over time, but not just with the flush. But definitely over time, you have to remove inflammation. You have to make the autoimmune, this is an autoimmune state, right? So the immune system is actually attacking there's a combination of the thyroid is expanded in order to get more iodine. The thyroid has got scabs on its knees. It's being attacked by antibodies. You don't have to have positive antibodies to have an inflamed thyroid. So the inflammation, they could just look at an ultrasound and tell you that you've got speckled thyroid tissue. The fact that it's hypervascularized, that is a definition of inflammation. Your antibodies might be negative, but your thyroid tissue is inflamed. So an anti-inflammatory diet, removing carbohydrates, etc., will definitely help that too. It's crucial.
From people you've worked with, do you find somebody with a nodule, most cases can remedy that without surgery then?
Yes, absolutely. What is difficult to remedy without surgery, just like somebody who maybe has a foot-long fibroid, right? So there is a point where you can teach the body anomalous tissue to regress. There is also a point of no return. A very large goiter may need surgery. It's kind of hard to make that tissue that has become also calcified to some extent to regress. But definitely, all of my patients, goiter is more difficult. A very large, softball sized goiter is going to be very difficult. But inflamed thyroid, smaller goiters, they've all regressed, and nodules, they regress.
Essentially, is a goiter just a nodule that's grown out of hand?
Both. It's also the thyroid itself enlarges. All the follicular tissue will enlarge. So inflammation. Now, Hashimoto's is, the lymph tissue in the thyroid is swollen.
Okay, so we know if there's a small nodule, good possibility following doing flushing in the lifestyle we're talking about today, they could reverse it. If somebody has a full-on goiter, can they reverse that naturally or no?
It depends on the size. It really depends on the size. A very large goiter that has become calcified, how can you can't, it's not, that's why they do the echogenic testing. They send sound waves to the thyroid to see how fast the sound wave comes back. If it comes back very fast, it's hard, it's calcified. If it comes back slowly, it went into the thyroid, which is just a big bloody mass of follicular tissue. So you want it to be a big bloody sponge. If it's got hard pieces on it that are calcified, how can you can regress a cystic vascular mass. You can't regress a hardened piece of tissue.
Makes sense. So for somebody in that case where it's just earlier stages, there's nodules forming, but they're small, they're still in hope that they can reverse. You mentioned that protocol with the salt. Are they doing that daily along with the lifestyle, or how often would they do that?
No, they're just doing that for a week. And sometimes they get diarrhea because, stuff comes out. But, I have many teenagers now who have thyroid nodules. So nobody's checking kids because they're just looking at TSH. So you can have rheumatism, you can have other autoimmune conditions, and they're not going to look for it because they don't associate those conditions with thyroid issues like I do. So if you are 70 years old, it may take more time to change this tissue that you've had, because most women become hypothyroid because of adolescence, which is what my second book is about. Iodine is so necessary to have a healthy healthy puberty, both male and female, but really, really important in female. But by the same token, I have more and more males today as patients. As I said, I have adolescents, pubertal, young people who have thyroid issues. So if you look at how the body if it has tried to heal since you were 12 and you're 70, we'll do the best we can. But if you have a softball-sized goiter, I don't think that we can make it shrink.
For somebody right now who is a young adult, feeling healthy, but they haven't been supplementing with iodine to this point, it sounded like, but I want you to confirm, doing that flush would be a good idea for them as well? And if so, how many times, if they're not suffering right now?
I have a lot of people's kids. So the flush is, you could do, my son is going to go to a pool because he hurt his back. And mom is an osteopath, but she's not in Athens. So he's been given some exercises by an osteopath locally, and he's going to go to a pool. And I said, honey, triple your iodine intake because he's going to go in the chlorine pool. So I would say that it sort of depends on the situation. It depends on your environment. But what I'm talking about with females is that parents are now conscious of precocious puberty. We know that precocious puberty is bad for adulthood. There are mental health implications involved. So iodine supplementation as a child is important for that, to prevent that.
So you gave that example there of your son going into a pool, upping his shield of iodine before going in. I would assume that would translate to any situation where somebody is going to come in contact with a lot of halides. If knowingly they're going to be doing that, they want to up their iodine beforehand?
Yeah, and I do it when I travel. Any infection, I tell if they're I have a cold, double your iodine, because iodine, all nutrients disappear. We use more nutrients when we're in a state of stress. So if your body's fighting an infection, that is a stress state. You need more iodine. And then it's also an antibacterial, antiviral. So that's great. It helps, it boosts your immune system. Your immune system needs iodine. So we regularly travel. And when we travel, we take more iodine. And then if somebody has a cold, I talked to my daughter today. My grandson has a cold. And I'm literally, she's nursing him. Honey, it's not enough for him to get the iodine from your breast milk. Get him to have a couple of drops of iodine. He's 2 years old.
Okay. How young can somebody start to take iodine orally?
Well, I'll just say my grandson is going to be 2 in January. He needs iodine. So I want her to somehow we were trying to brainstorm how to get it in him, because he doesn't drink juice. He's getting it from her breast milk, but not adequately. I mean, she's very busy. There's stress, and I don't know, she can put it on a piece of meat.
Right. But what I'm getting at is, you mentioned 2 and you wanted him to get some, but for a babies
who are nursing,
like newborns, should they be supplementing, or do they get enough?
My daughter has been
milk?
taking a lot of iodine, and he's had enough, but he's now older and he's eating more regular foods. So nursing is enough.
So through childhood, say somebody ends breastfeeding at 3, they're eating solids. The parents are aware of what we're talking about today and want to make sure they're getting enough iodine into the kid. We talked about that 2-drop dose, but that's for adults. Is that a good dose for kids as well?
I would say 1 drop.
But again, like I said before, highlighting the fact that the kidneys can remove excess.
Yeah.
There is so much fear around iodine. That's why I want to get into the nuance here, because we've been, from what you're sharing, for worse, we've been instilled with so much fear around this element.
It is a water-soluble nutrient. So it's not like vitamin D. It's not like vitamin A. It's not like, except for, selenium. You can be toxic in selenium. That's why I don't recommend supplementing. But iodine is a water-soluble nutrient, and all my books from the 40s and 50s they measured the kidneys. They checked, they tested people's urine. So they did all this research for us that tells us that iodine excess comes out in the urine. And the problem is that nobody's doing the Hakala lab tests. They're all doing the local lab, and they're testing radioactive iodine. They're all looking for Chernobyl. None of these iodine blood tests that you get are testing organic iodine. They're testing for radioactive iodine.
For somebody like you that's been on iodine for a long period of time, you're fully topped up. Do you ever do that salt protocol that you talked about?
I haven't in years, no. No, I stopped drinking tea. I did it when I stopped, years ago. I was drinking a lot of tea. I was going back and forth to China. No, I don't need to do that.
Okay. So you already talked about a week. If somebody has nodules, they would want to incorporate that. And then for somebody who is a healthy adult about to begin an iodine protocol like you're talking about here, would they just want to do that salt protocol 1 or 2 times to flush everything out?
I put it on the protocol because most of my patients are drinking, a lot of them are drinking tea. In the US, it's iced tea. They think that it's healthier than coffee. They write decaf tea. So that's why I put it on their protocol, because we've got to get rid of the halides from the tea. I can't go into, I used to look at, I had a patient from Kazakhstan. I had, the iodine content in the soil of where this person was from. So, people from Michigan, I'm going to, okay, man, yeah, maybe you need more. Maybe that's why. My family's from Tennessee. The mountains are devoid of iodine. So it's sort of a regular thing that I have people do now. It's not, some people, as I said, they get diarrhea. Some people don't want to do it for a week. One person asked to do it for less because they were afraid of the salt. You have this whole hypertension fear that also comes with salt, a whole other context.
We talked about best time to take it. It sounded like that would be sometime in the morning. What about spreading the dosage out throughout the day? 2 drops, say taking 1 in the morning, 1 around dinner time. Any advantage there?
I don't see it.
Any advantage including that in the food of a pet?
Definitely. That J. Crow's is geared towards animals anyway. They don't want you to think that they're selling it to human beings, for horses, right? So we know that there are tons, that hypothyroidism is huge in pets today, dogs and cats, because of what we're feeding them. So yeah, I think that I used to give my dog iodine.
For somebody who has autoimmune thyroid issues, Hashimoto specifically, there is a lot of fear. There's already fear about taking iodine in general. And then there's another additional layer for people in that category. When you're working with someone with Hashimoto's, is the protocol any different with iodine?
No, and I explain all of this. I go into research. I've researched all of this, and I explain in my article on my articles page about why there's this fear today. So it's Theodore Coker won the Nobel Prize in 1911, and he had a reaction to sodium iodide. He might have also been taking who knows what other kinds of stuff. So he kind of started the anti-iodine thing. He's the one who associated taking iodine with hyperthyroidism. At the same time, every single physician was giving iodine to their patients. And then they all of a sudden stopped because he was a big guy. He just won a Nobel Prize. Everybody thought, oh, and people complained. Other doctors complained that now, iodine has been given a bad rap. And then they started using it again to calm down patients when they were calm down. Actually, it's associated with hyperthyroidism. When they were cutting out people's goiter, they would give them a ton of iodine to make the heart not beat too hard. So it came back into favor clinically. But unfortunately, these were surgeons who loved cutting stuff out, and they were still geared towards cutting out goiters rather than healing them. So we have documentation of somebody like Kreil saying people who have inflamed thyroids, give them iodine and natural desiccated thyroid, and it will shrink. So, but I have to go into all this. There's so much documentation that I have to explain when we talk about this, and I do that in my articles.
Does somebody need to ease into it though more if they have Hashimoto's? Taking the iodine?
No. Your thyroid is inflamed. Remove the carbohydrates, remove the food, remove the tea, remove all these things that you're doing. Maybe you're running. Maybe you're, doing CrossFit. Maybe all those things that are raising cortisol levels will also cause your immune system not to function properly. It's not the iodine. The iodine, everybody has to take iodine.
Okay. I just thought there might be some nuance there with dosages and easing in, and somebody who their thyroid's under attack and at least has a certain amount of damage at that point.
Some people have symptoms and some people don't. Some people have positive antibodies and they don't react to the iodine. I've had patients react to the iodine with palpitations who had no antibodies. So, it really goes with, you have to address each case individually. There's not a hard and fast rule for people, because some people don't react and some people overreact. And then we do the flush and then we go very slowly because of resistance.
Are there any other supportive nutrients somebody wants to make sure they're getting with the iodine that complement that as they're turning their thyroid back on?
No, they're all in food. So you have this famous cofactors of selenium and zinc and yada, yada, yada. I'm sorry, I don't think any of that's necessary if you're eating steak, because all of those are more bioavailable in the ruminant meat that you're eating.
Okay, important caveat there, though, for somebody who is eating the way you're talking about, which for a lot of people is extreme and won't be going to that level, which is fine. Everybody has their own journey. And
Sure.
And yeah, it's for them to decide. But I just think it's important we highlight that's if you're consuming a carnivore diet, which is heavy in ruminant animals.
Well, the thing is that supplements can be toxic. So selenium is very easily toxic. I talk about in my book, Good Fat is Good for Girls, that it's you need a lot less selenium than it is, 200 micrograms is usually what people are taking or told to take. And that's too much, because selenium is easily toxic, and too much selenium actually prevents the thyroid from making hormone. So I just don't like supplements, because you're getting this huge, it's like taking a club to your nutrition rather than allowing your body to decide, go to the market and say, I'll have a little bit of this, I'll have a little bit of that, I'll need a little bit of this. And it's in the form that the body recognizes, rather than hitting it over the top of the head with, 100 milligrams of zinc.
This ties back to what we talked about before with the organs, where if you're consuming those in supplement form, you might be pushing a lot more in the body than needed.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about vitamin D. We got into this last time, and listening back afterwards, I realized I needed clarification, so I'm sure other people do as well. You're not a fan of supplementing with it. You don't feel the sun has anything to do with our level of vitamin D in the body.
Right.
Well, let's start there, because it's an underlying assumption by basically everybody that vitamin D, our main source, is sunlight. Talk about where we got that wrong.
We got that wrong when they took away our fat. So nobody was making you stand outside, getting a half an hour of sun on your skin pre 1980s. I mean, you can go to Ngram Viewer and look up this stuff, see when it started to be written about, when it started. I do that all the time with things. Inuits don't have vitamin D deficiencies. They don't have things, illnesses that are associated with low vitamin D, because if they don't go and eat Pringles from the store that, people brought, they are living on seal, and it's a very fatty animal. So that vitamin D is a fat soluble nutrient that comes from the food they're eating. It's all very new. And the 70, the magic number 70 that I've learned in school is not, I don't think you need that much. You have to remember, most people are coming to me knowing that I'm a thyroid specialist. They probably have thyroid issues. Most of them do. And if you are hypothyroid, you can't synthesize nutrients anyway. So you need adequate thyroid function to be able to turn that animal fat into vitamin D.
Okay. A lot more I want to get into within this to make sure I fully understand. So are we saying that vitamin D, which I would totally agree with, you can get it through at least certain foods, but are you saying that the sun can't provide vitamin D, or it's just not what we should rely on?
Okay, so the sun hits the lipids on our skin, and that is supposed to turn it into vitamin D3, right? The synthesis that happens through lipids. Okay, so it it actually doesn't work that way. I mean, it may work that way. It's sort of a backup plan because nobody's eating fat. If you're not eating fat, maybe, I mean, I'm in the sun all the time. If I weren't in the sun all the time in Scotland, for instance, I'm not going to be eating vitamin D. Most people say, oh, I'm taking vitamin D seasonally because of the sun. This is all, I mean, I haven't looked it up recently, but I'm sure if I did a deep dive into it, I could tell you the year, just like I did with folate. We don't need folate either. The year that they started pushing this through, I'm sure this came from after the cholesterol hypothesis, because the only way you can get vitamin D, vitamin A, any fat soluble nutrient is if you eat that damn cholesterol.
Okay. The way I understood it before talking to you, we can get vitamin D obviously from a supplement. We can get it through certain foods, and then we can get it through the sun. And the way I've looked at it is when I'm not getting sunlight here in Ontario in the wintertime, I need to be upping through supplementation or foods vitamin D so my body has that. And I'm still a little bit gray here. It sounds like you're not saying you can't get vitamin D from the sun. It's just not our primary source. Do I have that?
Right. It's not a primary source. Yeah, it's not as efficient. There are plenty of people who don't live in the sun, who eat a lot of animal fat, who don't have vitamin D issues. So you have, I mean, fluoride causes vitamin D deficiency. You can't just isolate one factor and blame everything on it. Well, I can. Thyroid, I can blame everything on hypothyroidism, on thyroid dysfunction. But again, it's a little bit more complicated. And supplements, isn't it better to get it from your food? I mean, we know that omega-3, the sardines, the whatever. I mean, I don't trust anybody's vats and vats of oil becoming rancid, and then put it in these little capsules. I'm suspicious of that. If you can get it from your food, I would recommend that.
Me too. But I just want to make sure people are covered depending on their unique situation. So I think we're on the same page now where sun can be a factor. And you're just saying that you lean into the food source. An area I want to dig into a bit more in that, because if you do a Google search, foods that are high in vitamin D, it's going to give you this list. I'm assuming by the way you responded there, you're not thinking we need to be that nuanced and search out these specific top foods to get it. You're just eating your animal fats, and that's going to cover you.
Absolutely, because you do a Google search, it is predisposed toward the cholesterol hypothesis. You're never going to find, I mean, unless you do the deep dives that I do in my research, on face value, stay in the sun, avoid animal fat. So you're not going to find, I mean, those top foods that you find, it's a crock. All Italians gravitate to the sun in the summer, and they all think they're getting tons of iodine. And all of my Italian patients that I had when I had an open practice before COVID, they were iodine deficient. So, it's like that. It's that kind of a...
Are you talking about vitamin D or iodine?
I was just mentioning iodine because people think that if you live by the sea, you can absorb the iodine.
Got it. Okay. But given we need to work with where people are at, somebody in Ontario not getting sun throughout the winter, not eating the way you're recommending, and even maybe they are eating a lot of animals, it's just not to the carnivore extreme. Could you see an importance of vitamin D supplementation if they're eating, say, an animal-based diet, but still including some carbs, and they need that little bump to keep their vitamin D in a good range?
I would question why they need that bump. I would say they're eating enough. They should eat enough fat because that's the most bioavailable and healthy source. I mean, I'm a bit of a hard ass. I don't know, but I think that obviously, if you can't eat, if you live in Ontario, I mean, I'm going to live in Scotland half the year. The sun is not going to shine very much. I will not consider taking vitamin D because I eat a lot of fat, but I think that you can eat some carbohydrates. I think that then we're going to, we might veer off into the Randall effect. I don't know. But if you have adequate animal fat and you have adequate and you're taking iodine and you have the ability to turn that fat into vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin E, then there's no need to supplement. So if you refuse to eat animal fat, definitely you should supplement.
Okay. So for your ideal diet, high in animal fat, moderate protein, no carbohydrates. Talk about the protein piece and how, if it does, how that changes the amount of that macro people are getting at different stages of healing.
Initially, because fat is anti-inflammatory, you got to make the hormones out of cholesterol. So we know that excess protein turns into glucose. If you can't metabolize that protein into, I'm not going to show my muscles, but if you get into muscles and into enzymes and all the things that protein is needed for, it's just going to turn into glucose. We can only metabolize glucose or ketones. So I definitely dial down the protein to moderate in a healing state, because most ill health is inflammation.
Other than diet, what are the biggest areas that in the modern world we're being impacted negatively by inflammation?
I think that we are over-exercising. Stress. I think that stress will definitely put a dent in it can turn an immune system autoimmune very easily, because cortisol causes inflammation. High cortisol levels cause inflammation. So we can go into all kinds of substances that people take, from synthetic hormones to over-exercising to foods that trigger inflammation. All of that will affect. So that's still diet, sorry. But yeah, stress, definitely. Over-exercising, definitely. Pollution.
What are some of the safeguards? I know you filter your water, but what are some of the things in your environment at home you do to protect against environmental toxins?
Take iodine. It's my shield.
And what dose are you taking daily?
I'm taking 6 drops of 5% daily. Have been for a long time.
Any specific reason? Previous health challenges? Because that's more than you're recommending to others.
I want a big shield, because I don't run for the hills. I'm falling in the Adriatic. Who knows, those fishing boats and the crap that their engines are spilling into the water. Because I know it comes out in my urine if it's too much. I take 12 drops when I'm traveling.
Last time we got into testing a little bit, you talked about 2 tests that you would do with people. One being thyroid, another being salivary cortisol. Let's talk about a thyroid panel and get into details there, because there's thyroid panels that your doctor will do, and then there's additional things that can be added. What do you think is really important there?
Free T3 and free T4. And if you have inflammation, the thyroid antibodies, the 2 that I recommend are antithyroid peroxidase and antithyroid globulin. Unfortunately, statistically, more people have positive antithyroid peroxidase, and I've had patients ask for both, and they absolutely refuse to do both, to test both. So, and they also have a situation where once the antibodies are positive, they won't test again, because they don't believe that you can make them go down. You can bring them into remission, which my patients do all the time. So you even have labs that say above 1,000, and somebody who's pregnant who needs to get those antibodies down, they don't know. We can't see them go down. They have to go to a special lab to ask for the actual number. They don't even bother, because they assume that there's nothing can be done. They can't be reduced. They can't go into remission.
Different people you've worked with over the years, following what we talked about today, the diet is the base, supplementing with iodine. What different chronic health conditions have you seen reverse?
Thyroid cancer, schizophrenia, many.
Anything that you found is particularly resistant to all this?
Weight loss. Some people takes a long time. Inflammation is, once your body has kind of, some people, I'm not really focused on weight loss. So a lot of people are focused on weight loss. I'm more focused on getting the body healthy. So depression will go away before some people, the 20 pounds that they're trying to lose.
For the person out there feeling like, I've been stuck with weight loss, this sounds interesting, but you're telling me to consume copious amounts of fat. How am I ever going to burn the fat on my body? Give them some reassurance there.
Well, when I give them a protocol, it's for their structure. So I'm not counting calories. I'm giving them the quantity of protein that they need for their structure and the quantity of fat that they need for their energy. So it's not calories in, calories out. There is a certain amount of nutrition energy, you would say, that you need for an adolescence. And somebody who's 6 foot tall needs a lot more than somebody who's 5 foot tall. But when you are in ketosis, which you will be burning your own body fat. But if you go out and run a marathon, you're not going to burn any body fat, because you can eat nothing and not burn any fat, because your body is holding on to that fat because it thinks you're in danger.
And for you, the big tool to provide the input to calm the body is this high-fat diet.
Yeah, absolutely. It reduces stress.
For somebody, again, thinking about heading into what we're talking about today, but this is a big leap. They've been having a more standard type diet, and they're thinking about all the saturated fat they're going to consume by eating this way. And they're thinking conventional, which we've all been told saturated fat causes all kinds of heart disease, health complications. Help put their mind to rest.
Well, saturated fat is cholesterol. So we know that, that's what I've written about in my books. Saturated fat, cholesterol prevents depression. Avoiding saturated fat, people who have low cholesterol levels are more at the risk of depression. They're more at the risk of mental health issues. So that's, everything in our body needs cholesterol. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's a source of our brain tissue. It's a source of our nerve tissue. It's a source of our energy, and it's a source of our steroid hormones. So our entire endocrine system, steroids hormones are made out of cholesterol. So if you're avoiding something that you need so much, we are human because we started eating so much animal fat. Our brain grew bigger because we ate animal fat, more animal fat. This is documented. You kind of have to take I don't want to say a leap of faith, but if it's only been, I'm 62, it's only been since 1984 that everybody has told you, because it wasn't until that, Time cover story with the unhappy face, the bad, the bacon bad and the eggs bad, that everybody started avoiding cholesterol. Before that, it was after the Ansel Keys, the cholesterol hypothesis. Heart disease was supposedly caused by this, but that is really the time. If you look at pictures of people at Jones Beach, on the beaches, that is really the time that you see. And you have to think, that was only, 60 years ago. That is not history.
Because this diet is so radically different from what the average person is eating right now, give us some ideas of meals and what a typical day could look like for somebody.
Well, it depends if you're 6 feet tall, but I'm 5'7.5". I have decaf with butter and egg yolk, and then I go paddleboarding, and then I come back and I do protocols, and then I eat, 150, 200 grams of steak and with some butter on it. And then I work. And then for dinner, I have the same thing. So for me, I may have some beef jerky during the day between calls. But that's, it's fine for me. Somebody might want more chicken. Somebody might want Bacon. If I could get bacon, I would eat it. I can't get bacon. So I like bacon. It's yummy, but I can't get it, so I'm not going to bother. I remember I put together for my height a pound of meat and 4 ounces of butter just to make it visual.
And because your diet is so limited in diversity, are you still excited about your meals?
Oh, yeah, I am. I don't think the variety, I mean, I love how I feel, and I'm hungry when I go eat. So I'm very happy to eat. I love my decaf with a froth of butter this thick in the morning. I may have one again at 11 if I did 8K like I did yesterday on the paddleboard. So yeah, I'm definitely excited about my meals. Because I'm excited about life.
Meals just fuel life, right?
Yeah. Fuel.
Fuel so you can live the life, yeah. So for you, drink-wise, you got your decaf fatty coffee.
Mm-hmm.
You filter your water.
Mm-hmm.
Any other drinks in there for fun?
Sometimes I'll have a half a shot of bourbon. Like, as much.
And is that purely for fun, or do you think there's certain benefits or negative side effects?
That's just for fun. It's small enough. Oh my God. No benefits at all. But as I said, it's such a small amount. It's not going to, if I had more, I'd turn red. So it would cause, I would flush. It would cause a vasomotor reaction. It would cause a hot flash because of the cortisol produced by alcohol being a stimulant.
Let's talk about sleep and how you prioritize that. I'm assuming you must, given the fact that the thesis of what everything you're working on through diet and lifestyle is to bring down sympathetic and bring up the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at sleep, and how do you make sure you're getting best sleep possible?
I go to bed early, go to bed about 9. I read 8:30, 9, latest 9:30. I have fat before I go to sleep, so I can tone down. That we know that cholesterol actually can increase parasympathetic tone. As an osteopath, parasympathetic and sympathetic have to be in balance. So that's very much a part of my training. And the magic of learning how to do it with food, with fat, it was really an epiphany for me, which is what I did when I went into menopause at 52. So I give myself fat. I have, obviously, if we're going to go for a trip or I have something very stressful coming up, if I wake up in the middle of the night, I have fat in my fridge. I just grab it and eat it and I go right back to sleep.
And what will that fat snack look like, whether it's before bed or middle of the night? Just a piece of butter or something simple, I assume?
Piece of butter on a meat cookie, or some of that tallow that I have from the leftover after I've given the gelatin to my daughter. There's that big thing of fat that's tallow. Yeah. I'll salt it and put salt. Yeah, just salt. I'll freeze it and I'll cut it into chunks and I'll just leave it there.
One thing I want to mention too, tying iodine into the sleep piece, you don't want to have your iodine right before bed. I've done that before and it does stimulate you, so you want to be careful.
Yeah. It'll wake up your your thyroid will be like, oh, let's make hormone. It's the morning.
And what do you do for oral care, skin care, given your focus on animal fats? Are those part of those routines as well?
I brush my teeth with, I think, salt, fluoride-free salt, something from the health food store. I make my own tallow cream. I don't do anything else.
What about shampoo, soap on your body? Do you use like tallow type stuff?
There's a tallow. My daughter sent me a tallow soap, and I got some kind of shampoo from the health food store. I can't remember. It's something very bland, but it's not tallow.
Any areas in the last number of years that you've really taken a pivot on or changed your mind on things?
Dairy. I actually republished my Good Fat is Good for Women menopause book because the snacks had cheese. And I decided that if people had menopausal symptoms because of the inflammation and because of their adrenal issues, they definitely had to take out the dairy, which causes inflammation because of the caseinomorphins.
Okay, we did talk about dairy last time, but since it's brought up again, I want to get into it a bit more here. Is this all dairy or just cow dairy?
Not butter. not butter. Okay.
No, not butter. Yeah.
Oh, A2, A1 you're talking about?
Well, just different. There's a lot of people in the health space that won't have cow dairy, but they'll have sheep or goat.
Right. It's A2.
There is a lot of variables. Well, that's A2, but you can also have A2 of cow milk as well.
Yes.
There's a lot of nuance, and we got into, again, some of this last time, but are we talking about all dairy, or are there certain details or types within that we can still have?
I think if you're on fire, you can't have any dairy. You can have butter, because we know that buttermilk is where all the proteins go, unless you are so sensitive that you need to make ghee, and you see the teeny tiny bit of milk protein and lactose come to the top. None of this has to do with lactose. It's all about proteins. So the more inflamed you are, you should not have any kind of dairy. So you can have Guernsey, Jersey, those places in England, they have the breeds of cows that are A2. Senegal, certain cows, yes, they are A2, but there is still a small quantity of caseinomorphins in that. So there's more in the regular, that breed that most cow milk is, but there's a smaller amount in the A2 goat, sheep, Jersey, Guernsey breeds. Now, if you are on fire, I don't recommend it, at least for a certain amount of time until the fires have been put out.
Did you personally notice a difference in your health when you took dairy out?
I did. My digestion was better. My husband's breath was better. And that was, And then I read Keith Woodford's book, The Devil in Milk.
Talk more about what that brought up for you.
Just reading about how heart disease, diabetes, things that he explains that most chronic diseases are because we're drinking A1 milk. So he's Australian or actually New Zealand, I don't know. Anyway, but he's talking mostly about how they actually prevented in Australia, the ability for people to have access to A2 milk, even though it was so much more documented, so much healthier for people.
So throughout our conversation, the two big targets that we're honing in on, cortisol through stress, we want to bring that down. Inflammation. Given the focus in on inflammation, we talked about testing before. Do you see any value in doing a test to look at overall inflammation and getting a number there to work from?
No, I recommend doing salivary cortisol, a diurnal salivary cortisol test, because your inflammation, you can do the CRP, you can do, it doesn't matter. Once you fix the cortisol, once you've removed obstacles to your healing, all those will come into line. They will come in, you have to reduce the inflammation. So I don't recommend testing. It's just like I recommend testing the thyroid and recommend testing salivary cortisol. And when you fix those things, everything else will just kind of come into line. So there's no reason to pay all this money for these other tests.
All right, Elizabeth, really enjoyed round 2, getting into some details on a lot of things we talked about in the first round. I appreciate you, the work you're doing. We're going to link up your website, your books, everything in the show notes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
We've tested over 8,000 people in our office. Over 97% are deficient in iodine. The vast majority is severely deficient in iodine. All thyroid hormone can't be made without iodine. Thyroxine, or T4, has 4 atoms of iodine attached to thyroid.